everybody in my family Democrat. I'm the only Republican in my family. So of course, when I came out as Republican, well, I'm not really Republican. I'm a Trumpican.
I don't even like Trump. I ain't vote for him, but I tell you what, I probably will next time. Because this dude seems to be turning black. The more he does, the more blacker he seems to get. Because they keep going after this dude for nothing. Sound just like what they've been doing to black people for years.
You ain't black.
So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No.
So Kamala Harris is throwing hip-hop parties and dancing it up on social media, which many have suggested that her choice to do so indicates that there must be an election coming up. Because whenever there is an election, there seems to be a typical propagandist ploy aimed directly at so-called black society, with the intended purposes of soliciting the black vote by imitating or propagating the things that they think black people like. We have Bill Clinton playing the saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show. We have Obama being likened to the second coming of Martin Luther King, Bernie Sanders name-dropping Martin Luther King, and we have Hillary Clinton with hot sauce in her bag and twerking with Roland Martin or whatever that dance was, and Kamala Harris making references to smoking blunts, listening to Tupac, and running through the airport with collard greens. You know, all the typical stuff indicative of their perception of black society at large. But now there seems to be a scramble or a panic by the Democrats, given that there is an election year coming up, and they are apparently sensing that they are in jeopardy of losing the majority black vote that they have taken for granted for all of these years. But the truth of the matter is, it's not that they're in fear of losing the black vote in the context that they are attempting to portray. No. It's that they're in fear of a united black collective that is galvanizing toward a purpose that hasn't been replicated since the civil rights movement of the 1960s. And the main fault of this galvanization is aimed directly at the men. Black men, to be exact. More specifically, black men who have descended from those who were enslaved in America. More specifically than that, black men under the age of 50, if I submit the survey from my anecdotal experience. And you could almost intuit that the Democrats knew of this impending problem that was rooted in the obstinance stemming from black male voters, by how they passively shamed black men by praising black women for getting the job done when it came to ensuring that certain Democrats were elected into office. Because when all else fails, if black men spearhead a campaign talking about tangibles and the ill effects of trickle-down economics and the intentional neglect of issues that appear to be disproportionately affecting black communities, in favor of an all-inclusive focus that has the tendency to promote immigrants, as well as a collective that has more than 100 different ways to identify themselves in lieu of male and female, then the best tactic is to divide any means of solidarity by utilizing the same tactics that were used to divide the black community in the first place: an intentional gender divide. One of the golden rules in content creation is that you can take the hard road, staying rooted in the principles of logic and reasoning, and stay broke, or at the least be faced with an arduous climb to achieve a fraction of success. But the best way to ensure immediate success is to say the things that women want to hear, or create symbolism that women can identify with or aspire to acquire, as we've seen with people who've managed to gain sizable followings such as Derrick Jackson. But the point is that Democrats knew this about women of all cultures and races, which may be part of the reason that Democrats were left befuddled after learning that Donald Trump won the majority white woman vote, despite the fact that his opponent was a white woman, which suggested that there are symbolic victories that have been used to seduce a Democratic vote from the so-called black society that just didn't work when it came to using Hillary Clinton as a symbolic gesture to win over women in white society. But why does this symbolism seem to work when it comes to persuading a black voter? Think about it. Why would Joe Biden predict that he would choose a female running mate for his presidency bid? Why would he forecast that he would nominate a so-called woman of color for the Supreme Court? Isn't that a position that should be reserved for the most qualified? And if a so-called woman of color is qualified, then so be it. But before even knowing who this woman of color would be, it suggests that there must be an exercising of intentional prejudice, whereas the litmus test is based on the color of skin and not the content of the character, which is ironically the antithesis to the agenda of the often quoted Dr. Martin Luther King, but also the very trick that Democrats have always used to solicit a black vote. It's always, oh, she will be the first black so-and-so. Oh, vote for him because he's the first black so-and-so. Always placing so much focus on the black of people who give no focus to the blackness after being elected.
So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people.
No!
Now, when you look at the choices of people that Joe Biden has surrounded himself with, who do you see? First of all, his choice of running mate in Kamala Harris was tactical within itself, and it bespoke of the amnesia that appears to exist within so-called black society with Democratic leanings. Here you had Kamala Harris that had to bow out of the presidential race and sit on the sidelines. And I recall that there were black women specifically that were not in support of her doing her run for presidency. In fact, when her track record was brought up during debates, she was embarrassed so badly that a great deal of black society was even questioning her so-called black card. But the moment that Joe Biden chose her to be his vice president, suddenly everyone's got amnesia. And now it's all about the AKAs and sister girl propaganda. And let's not even talk about the ones who use the argument that Trump was racist and therefore Joe Biden should be the one to replace him. I mean, that's like disqualifying a bus driver for having a sprained ankle and voting to replace him with someone who's a full-on quadriplegic. But back to the point. And when the Democrats doubled down on the fact that they would prioritize immigrants and LGBT issues over the plight of the so-called black community, there were black women with Democratic leanings that were still in support of the Democrats due to the fact that women's issues were also supposedly going to be prioritized. And while not every so-called black woman fell for this okie doke, there were black women who viewed themselves as a special group set apart from a black society and not as a participant within the whole of black society. As we saw when Ice Cube tried to discuss his plan for Black America with certain individuals.
I'm talking about black people pressing him to give things to black people.
I care about what's in this contract with Black America for women, and it's not, we're not mentioned at all in the contract with Black America. And I want to know,
I mean, when you mention black people, you mentioning black women, so
Oh,
don't count yourself
no,
out. Yes,
that's
you are.
not
that's like administration say that when they
Black people is not
minorities,
black
they
women.
make the
Black women are not included in black people.
Black women have specific needs that are not also being met. And we also feel that there should be some things that are specific to us and our plight as well.
Now, remember how I said that not every black woman fell for the okie doke when the Democrats tried to use the gender divide to promote women's issues instead of viewing those issues as being part and parcel of a greater community issue? So what happened was, while the Democrats had many women, including black women, mesmerized at the idea that they were pro-woman, and by extension, woman of color, so long as Kamala Harris and Ketanji Brown were symbolic of the notion, what they didn't know is that while the Democrats were allegedly pro-woman, none of them could seem to identify exactly what a woman was. Not even the Supreme Court justice that was nominated in order to purchase black women's future fidelity toward the Democratic Party of do nothing specifically for black people.
No!
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in
Okay.
this context.
So you
I'm not a
believe
biologist.
the meaning of the word woman is so unclear and controversial that you can't give me a definition? The fact that you can't give me a straight answer about something as fundamental as what a woman is underscores the dangers of the kind of progressive education that we are hearing about.
Now, suddenly, on social media, there appears to be various black men in the age range of 25 to 35, if I had to take a guess just by looking at them, that are coming out in support of Trump, which is odd. Because as I recall, Trump was persona non grata after defeating Hillary. And even Jussie Smollett sought to use the apparent disdain for Trump in black society as the basis for why he was attacked.
What they have on? MAGA hats!
It was so bad that anyone black who took a meeting with Donald Trump or was seen in a picture with Donald Trump was called out for somehow being a sellout. And black men would become irrationally emotional behind the idea of seeing a MAGA hat on the head of anyone who was black. But why suddenly the change of heart? I mean, before Trump ran for presidency, he was cool with hip-hop artists, celebrities, and he was in movies and had a popular TV show that everyone tuned into. But the moment that he tossed his hat into the ring to become president, suddenly he became the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. Now, while I personally think that Trump is more of a Trump supremacist than white supremacist, this is what they were using as their main selling point as to why he should be replaced with Joe Biden of all people. The man who has a track record of pushing verifiably detrimental policies on black communities, and the main talking point that they use against Trump is that he took out a full-page ad suggesting that New York bring back the death penalty and execute the Central Park Five, which, considering that the Central Park Five were later found to be innocent, I can see how the newspaper ad is more problematic in retrospect. But the ad came out in 1989, and the Central Park Five were exonerated in 2002 after the real perpetrator confessed to the crime. But the way that some people use this as the reason that Trump is worse than Biden is as if Trump put this ad out after the Central Park Five were exonerated, which would be cause for the level of disappointment that is currently being given to the subject matter. But if we were to exclude race from the matter, the sentiment for anyone who was believed to have violated someone in the way that the innocent Central Park Five were believed to have done by many at that time, albeit by way of coercion via corrupt law enforcement, there has always been the same suggested punishment that even Samuel L. Jackson's character captured in A Time to Kill.
Yes, they deserve to die, and I hope they burn in hell!
But when that is used as one of the main talking points to dissuade black voters from Trump, it begins to lose its sway the longer that black voters under 50 are able to observe who Joe Biden really is, now that Trump is no longer in the picture. And one thing that I have heard coming from black men is that they would prefer Trump over Biden, not because Trump would do something for black people, but because in his doing nothing, he at least wouldn't do what the Democrats are doing, that are specifically harming black people. If black people talk to Trump about reparations, he'll be against it and move on. If black people talk to Biden about reparations, he'll be against it, then turn around and entertain the idea of giving reparations to illegal immigrants detained at the U.S.-Mexican border. Some sources suggested that these cash payments ranged in upwards of $480,000. Now, Trump might do a plan where he focuses on creating jobs for Americans. And if you brought up the idea that he should do something that should specifically benefit women in his policy, he might tell you to kiss his behind. But Biden would do something that is specific for women, and then tell you that a doorknob qualifies as a woman. And it is this reason that I believe that there are more and more black men that are saying that if indeed it did come down to a decision between Biden or Trump, that they would choose Trump in a heartbeat.
You ain't black.
What I believe is more evident than the notion of black men becoming Trump supporters is that more than liking Trump, they are done with the Democrats and their trickle-down, all-inclusive, do-nothing policies of benign neglection while giving focus to Asian protection and immigrant protection and rainbow flag protection, and using the same old tired and played out shaming tactics to manipulate Black Americans to facilitate in their own usurpation. You can't just say Black anymore. You have to say Black and brown, or people of color. So the Democrats seem to use the groundwork started in Black society and the headway made by Black society to facilitate the upward mobility of groups that exclude foundational Black Americans from benefiting within their respective societies. I recall seeing a show that centered around a Black-owned hair care business, and in this story, there was a Korean-owned hair store that set up shop in a majority Black neighborhood with a majority Black customer base. That when this husband and wife, who had their own hair care brand, approached the Korean store owners about putting their products in the store, the Koreans, in so many words, told the husband and wife that they only do business with other Koreans. And this is who the Democrats would rather use to overlook and ultimately bury any suggestion that calls for a laser focus on foundational Black American issues. The Democrats know that the jig is almost up, and now they are starting to lose their grip on Black women, specifically foundational Black American women, who are starting to take notice that they are being played, and that the Democrats' last-ditch attempt to use immigrant Black people to represent the legacy of Black Americans, whom many of them have shown within their speech an obvious deviation from the narratives put forth by our foundational Black American forebears, which shows that the Democrats are at their wits' end. And now there are more and more Black men who formerly chose not to participate in the voting process who are now saying that they're willing to come out of voting retirement just to make sure that Biden and Harris are sent packing. And the fact that Black women have joined with them in solidarity has all of the Democrats shook to the point of desperation. And they might be so desperate as to push a campaign that tries to make Black women envision Kamala as being president one day, so as to create an avatar out of her by which Black women can exist vicariously through these accomplishments and become motivated to vote. Because if she's Black, then she's a reflection of them as well, which is ridiculous, but it happens. And it's the main reason why so many Black people voted for Obama the first time around. Maybe even the second, but definitely the first. Which still leaves a problem as far as Kamala goes. At least with Obama, in all of his doing nothing specifically for Black people, he was a symbolic reflection for Black men, and his wife Michelle was a symbolic reflection for Black women. But with Kamala and her husband, there is no reflection in this symbolism where Black men can be duped by the idea of an avatar by which they exist vicariously. Which may be the reason that Kamala's husband always seems to be MIA. Especially during those blunt-smoking Tupac discussions, because it's harder to make the sale to a Black man when you are an Indian woman who exists in the realm of racial ambiguity, that has aligned herself with a spouse of a choice that dispels the ambiguity and defines who you are definitely. Now, choose who you want to be with, but don't make Black your selling point when nothing about your upbringing, track record, nor home life is indicative of the foundational Black American culture that you pander to during election time. So I don't know every motivation behind the decision that some Black men made to jump on the Trump train, whether it's because they like the guy or just want to stick it to the Democrats. But what I do know is that the Democrats have abused the fidelity of the Black vote, and the older generation may be the most likely to vote Democrat regardless. But as is the natural course with all things human, the older generation dies out. The Democrats know this, which may be why they are the party who is the most supportive of the controversial propaganda being used to indoctrinate the children, as well as the promotion of legislation that robs the parent of their ability to intervene. This is the party that is like Dracula sucking the blood from his victim, then propagating hypocrisy about the idea of a Republican boogeyman that's going to put y'all back in chains, as Biden once said. All of this in order to dissuade Black voters from becoming inflicted with what the Democrats have feared the most, a Black American epidemic of long overdue drapetomania. And if you don't know the meaning of drapetomania, I'll put it this way. It's the opposite of what the majority of Black American voters have been doing consistently for the last 50 plus years.